And by sort of taking this kaleidoscopic look from each perspective, it just was able to show that we rarely have the clue we think we have when it comes to our perception of others.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview, where our guest today is Adrienne Brodeur, and we are going to be talking about Little Monsters, her new novel, which is a Book Reporter Bets On selection. Loved this book. Perfect sit by the pool book, people. I somehow missed reading Wild Game, her best-selling memoir, when it came out in October 2019, but I did not lose time. I actually ran to the library and got this book out the same day and got home and started reading it to catch me up. So we're going to touch on that a little bit because I have some questions about her against this book. And our reviewer, Nora Peel, had this to say about Little Monsters. So let's say it's not just my praise. Brodeur offers a nuanced and thoughtful portrait of Cape Cod and its culture. Little Monsters is a perceptive novel about a complicated family that will both infuriate and fascinate readers. And with that, welcome, Adrienne. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Carol.
So let's start by you telling us about the plot of Little Monsters. So where's your vision of this book?
Okay, well, for those of you who have read Wild Game, you know of my fascination with family secrets. So it should come as no surprise that in Little Monsters, family secrets loom large as well. The book is set on Cape Cod, on all different towns along the whole arm. This is how we do the Cape. And it's set in 2016 because I was just fascinated by the moodiness of that time. So it's not a political book, but it's evocative of the general anxiousness or the anxiety that people were feeling at that time. And it tells the life of a small family, the Gardner family, which is comprised of a father and two adult children. The mother died long ago. And as the book opens, something major is at stake for each of the characters. So Adam Gardner, who's the patriarch and about to turn 70, he's a marine biologist, and he's on the precipice of making a huge discovery about whale communication that he believes will sort of keep him relevant. And he is very anxious about his relevancy as all of us who are aging, which apparently as everyone are. He has a 41-year-old son named Ken, who has just sealed a real estate deal that has sort of catapulted him into a new stratosphere of wealth. And that has also enabled him to run for Congress, which is really his life stream. And then there's the daughter, Abby, who's 38. And she has just sort of found her voice as an artist and is about to be discovered in a big way. So this is what's brewing as the book opens. But yet everyone's kind of holding tight to these announcements and secrets, and they're waiting to reveal them at Adam's 70th birthday. So the novel's propulsion moves towards that date, and lots of stuff happens.
Lots of stuff happens along the way. And it's not just the day of the party, folks. It's right from the beginning. Right. So every book's got this moment where the idea started. I call it the kernel of the idea. Where did this one come from? Who did you have, or what came to mind?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of these things where, I didn't have an exact kernel. What happened was I got sent home from book tour for Wild Game in March 2020, as we all did. And I remember just sort of reflecting a lot on siblings. I do come from a complicated family. I've got one biological brother. I have many step siblings. Both of my parents had half siblings they didn't know about. So I was just ruminating a lot about siblings. And I feel like on some level, it's like there's a little woodpecker that just click, 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 an idea just keeps, you notice where your subconscious goes. And so it went there. And I thought, I should read Cain and Abel, which is, the original sibling story of all time. And that story is so bare bones. It's like 3 sentences. I thought I was going to find out about motivation and everything else. There is none of it. But I did glean from that fable the structure of the book, because of course in Cain and Abel, gifts are given to the father, and that just that gave me some framework. But truly what I wanted to do was examine a family very deeply and from the inside. I think we all think we know where we come from, who we are, how we're acting, and by sort of taking this kaleidoscopic look from each perspective, it just was able to show that we rarely have the clue we think we have when it comes to our perception of others.
I completely agree. So the book is written these chapters. You're telling the story from different characters' point of view. Did you always know that was going to be the style going in, or did you play with that later?
I knew that was going to be the style, but I didn't know how many characters would be point of view characters. And honestly, so many of them wanted voices. At one point, I had some chapters told from the therapist's perspective, from the daughter's perspective. So, I did end up sort of doing some weeding and keeping it just to the five main characters. And arguably Jenny's more of a peripheral character. She's Abby's best friend and Ken's wife.
Yeah. I also thought that at some point it could have been one from the grandchildren's point of view.
Yeah,
of
no,
I seeing.
I did have some of that in there.
A whole different view of these people, So you deliver these fully formed characters, which is something I really love. So reading even the first chapter about each of them, each section, right, I felt like I knew them immediately. You brought them so much to life. And I can't say that I always see that. Did you spend a lot of time on those opening chapters to set them up so well?
Well, first of all, thank you. I really think characters are like icebergs. You see this much, but you have to know the whole of them. And for me, anyway, that involves really writing quite a long way into the book and then coming back once because it's about compression. I think being a novelist is all about compressing scenes and distilling moments. And so you have to really, even if you have an idea of who the character is, it's only until you've written quite far in that you're able to do the kind of writing that will enable you to have, how would Abby speak differently to Jenny than Ken? What would be the backhanded, sort of the offhand comment? And it just takes a while. That said, I had a very unique experience with Adam, arguably the character who's least like me, a crabby 70-year-old male who's bipolar. And with that guy, I just put my hands over the keyboard. He was so in me. I don't know why he wasn't more work. I mean, I had to do a lot of studying about whale research and all that type of thing, but his personality was just there. The rest of them, I had to do the usual amount of work to get to know them.
Well, it's funny because I love that readers early on learn that Adam is bipolar, the father. He's playing around with his medication. And there's this moment where he tosses this cocktail of meds because he's been off his meds because he thinks that will help him with his research. But he knows he's kind of like off right now and he's going to have to see his daughter. So he puts together a combination that he thinks will get him. It's like he's his own pharmacist, putting together what he thinks will get him through that conversation. And the things are going really off the rails. And I really like you have him dealing with this so far up front because we're seeing, oh my gosh, who is this guy that is self-medicating and a little of this and a little of that, and I can have a conversation.
Right. Well, and arguably many people self-medicate for less reasons. I mean, that would be the cocktail at night. That would be all the dispensaries we see everywhere. People are doing this day in and day out. And obviously I have some bipolar in my family. I know many people who have it. It's a condition that affects people very differently. And there are some very high functioning people with this mental disorder. So it was just interesting to me how it might be managed on a short term. And so you're right. He goes off his meds because there's that feeling of grandiosity, of being all-knowing and your mind having access to so much of your life when you're in a manic episode. And so I think he truly believed that if he stopped taking sort of the anesthetizing medication, he'd be able to connect all the dots of his idea. And
And he's like on a roll doing that. He's on a roll doing that. I really love it.
He doesn't want to get busted, so he's got to come down when he's got a dinner party going on. So he takes a few things to make himself relax, and it doesn't all work out as well as he thinks it's going to, but he tries.
Right, right, right. You know, there's a plot line that also weaves in and a character that I'm not going to share because we want to keep, hold back from spoilers. But I did wonder if his bipolar fed into that situation and what happens there. So years
Fed
ago,
to
years
the
ago. Yes. The plot line we don't want to share
I
years
see what you're
ago.
asking me.
That,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So when people read the book, think about this.
I got it. No, that makes sense because it also is often associated with some more promiscuous behavior as well.
Yeah. So I was just kind of going there. So then we've got Ken, who's got these political ambitions. And oh boy, is he laying, if I live here, it's a better county. This we can swing the people. And he strategized in complete detail of
Right.
exactly what he's going to do. He strategizes in his own head and he plans and plans and plans, not sharing much with other people. It's more in his head of grandiosity at this point. And I thought you had a lot of fun giving him this role, especially since it's 2016 and
Right.
everything's up in the air in politics. So why not, Ken? Why not run? Go, why try?
No, and I think Ken, it's funny because Ken gets the strongest reactions. People either love him or really hate him. And I actually, I mean, I know Ken can't get out of his own way and he can be, he can do dumb things. He says dumb things, all that kind of stuff. But the fact is he's wounded. He is the character in the book who's just had the hardest time. He lost his mother when he was young. These stepmothers came and went. He has a father who really is unavailable, and he becomes very, very attached to his younger sister. And at some point, she goes through adolescence and just, breaks free of everyone. And he just feels abandonment after abandonment. But he, I think of Ken as, like any of us, animals, we're at our most aggressive when we're wounded, and that's him. And he is trying, but as I said, he really can't get out of his own way.
Yeah, yeah. And his wife, Jenny, who's also his sister's best friend, which I absolutely love, she unravels as the book goes on. And we get it at the beginning, she's got a perfect yard. Everything's under control. Daughters are under control, everything's there. And by the time the party swings around, she's completely undone. The party has gone from this small dinner cocktail thing into this soiree that's outside. And I love seeing the party pivot with all of it going to her. Like, oh, this is going to happen. We just need a tent outside now. And we need like a speaking area. And we need this. So let's talk about her, because I find that she was the person that was kind of anchoring Ken all this time by just doing his bidding of what was going on, kind of sitting outside this family going, okay, we have to do a party. All right, I'll do it.
Yeah, well, she was a really fun character. And in some ways, is she getting undone or is she finding her voice? That's the real question, because one of the things that sort of was in the back of my mind is, if you have sort of a writerly analytic question, that you have to put out of your mind when you're writing, but it was about female power and finding your voice. And in some ways, all of the female characters are really trying to be heard and find their voice. And that's what I enjoyed about Jenny. So she had recreated herself after sort of a racy youth as kind of a buttoned up proper person. And she was really trying to fill this mold and be the perfect political wife and on and on. And the fact is, it just didn't fit. She's got her own dreams, and they kind of started to take over.
Yeah. And then she finds a lot of liquor. She finds a lot of liquor to help her make these new decisions. I think Abby's my favorite character. I felt for her with all the secrets and the fact that her brother imparted his values to measure the worth of her life. Like she's doing her thing. And the strings he held over her that made her dance like some kind of a marionette, like the fact that he owns the place she lives. And it's like this give take. I'm not going to give it to you. I may give it to you. This. She became empowered, though, as the story went on. And you really saw where she'd been her whole life. And all of a sudden, she's having this moment, like the other characters in the book, but she's having a really big moment if you're an artist. Did you enjoy bringing her into her own? Because, man, she was fun.
Oh, yes, I did. No, I really, really did. Abby was someone who, like Jenny, but even more so, has been struggling her whole life to find her voice. And I certainly can relate to that as a writer. It literally, she's doing it in a different way, in a different medium, but she is gonna tell her story, and she's gonna tell the story that she wants to tell, no matter who doesn't like it.
Yeah, who doesn't like it? And at one point, the friend-friend relationship between Abby and Jenny is played against the spousal relationship of Jenny and Ken. So they decide, I love this, what they said in Abby's house stays there, and what Jenny and Ken talk about stays in their house. But then the secrets get spilled. And I feel like it was this great girlfriend moment of, okay, I'm going to tell you a secret, and you're going to tell me one back, and I'm going to do this. Wait, that's a really big one. Wait, that might count as two. I'm not quite sure. So for so long with your mom in Wild Game, you were harboring her secrets.
Right.
And her affair was one that she tried to make you complicit in. Was it nice to have the characters in this book sharing the secrets instead of them being, on their own with whatever they had inside of them?
I mean, honestly, it was really fun to fictionalize secret keeping generally, and to write about strong friendships. I mean, which I imagine you have. I have had some wonderful, wonderful female friendships in my life that are just so buoying and supportive and fabulous. I liked that theirs was a complicated relationship because they knew so much about each other, as Abby also knows so much about her brother, and both Ken and Jenny didn't want the other to know all the dirt about them. Ken didn't want his wife to know that he was once unpopular and fat and that type of thing. And Jenny didn't want her, her shady past to be common knowledge for Ken. So Abby was kind of put in this predicament, but they sorted out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is funny because it is female friendships. It's like the person you text and go, you're not going to believe what's happening. I am going out of my mind right now. And then they come back with something so calm and you're like, oh, you're not in my situation. You can really help. This is good. Or I go, wait a second, you've been there before. You know what this is like, and you just captured that, so well. And then Tessa, one of the daughters, gives Ken a real run for his money. She's always pushing his buttons, and I felt like if the grandchildren were going to have a chapter, she was going to have the brilliant, one. She's very different from her twin, but I got a feeling you really loved writing those teenage girls.
I did. I have, my daughter is older now, but I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. And boy, oh boy, do they keep you honest, right? They are not going to let you get away with anything. And it's wonderful in its own way too. I mean, you also have to keep up with the times in a way that I don't think you would otherwise. I mean, my children have schooled me so much in the best possible way about pronouns and usage. And when I get it wrong, they're not condemning, they're just sort of encouraging me to think about it. And I love that about teenagers. I mean, hopefully they're going to make this world a better place.
Yeah. And there are also those computer questions that you can go to them and in 2 seconds they go bing, bing. And you're like, really? Like that was it?
Did you try the on button, Mom?
Did you have it on mute? Like, do you think that was the problem? And I'm just there like, how did you know that? And you're not even in the room. Like, how did you know that? Not even in the room,
Yeah.
So, was there one character you enjoyed writing more than the other? Like, is there one that you settle in?
Well, Adam was the easiest by far. And I just, he would crack me up. I mean, he would just make me laugh with the things he would say, like, when there are ordinary birds at the feeder, he would call them ornithological riffraff. I mean, he was hilarious, and he was great fun to write and think about, and just to see his reaction. But he moved me at times, like when he is out with Steph on that whale watch, and yeah, I think he's the guy who, if this book were going to go on, he's not someone who's going to change. I think most of the characters change, but you kind of just accept that he is who he is. He's an older man, and Adam.
And there's a moment for him where we're in his office and he's clearing everything out. And you realize those moments of clearing out do not take as long as you think, but he's holding each thing up and saying, I remember this. He looks at the things that matter to him through the years, and he takes stock of them and the stories behind them and shares it. And it takes so little time for him to pack it up, but readers see all the emotions rolling through his head. Like he's seeing where he got this award. He's seeing where this thing happened. And I think that this is such an important moment to the storytelling, because it's that moment where his life, if 70, which sounds so close, stops.
Yes, it does.
70, can't you keep going? Come on, seriously. And you also have that kind of shame moment of carrying your boxes out to the car while
Right.
everyone else is still working there. And
Right.
I felt like that scene, if you could talk about a book with scenes as well, because I think cinematically, often when I'm reading a book these days, you just see the emotion that's going through him, that everything you care about is now in boxes and you're
Yeah.
walking out with it.
Well, first of all, thank you for noticing that scene. You're the first person who's brought it up. And I do feel like as a writer, I tend to be very scene based, like even with Wild Game, and memoir can be so internal. I just remembering these big moments in my own life. Like I knew from the get-go writing that book that there was going to be the night of my mother's kiss, there was going to be that lobster dinner, there were going to be, that wedding, that type of thing. With the novel, of course, you can do anything at any moment. And in some ways it's very daunting because you're kind of writing into the mystery and hoping to touch something larger. But yeah, I thought a lot about the fact that there is a moment in our lives, and whether that's when you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, when you start to think this might be it. Like I might have done the great things that I'm going to do. And you still, you don't feel that much different on the inside. You don't know why people aren't listening as much or taking you as seriously. And he was clearly squeezed out of his office. And so, yeah, it was a moment. And I just imagined him moving, and it was thrilling to be able to find these things that reflected back to different moments in the book that would help people understand who he was and what he wanted.
It's funny. I packed up my office at Condé Nast. I left and I didn't even know what I was going to do next. I just didn't know. So I said to them, look, I'm going to come in on a Sunday with my husband, just get me a dumpster, because I knew a lot of it was going in the dumpster. But I said, the rest, I'm going to pack up in boxes and take home. And as you're taking each thing off, it's very emotional because you remember creating that poster. You remember creating that promotion. You remember creating all the stuff. And I'm also going home not knowing, like Adam, what I'm going to do next. Like I had no clue. I just knew that magazines, I was kind of over. I didn't want to make one more rate card. I was on the business side. And it was like this moment where I had to step back. And then we left our office in New York and packed up a 2,000 square foot office during COVID, because I said, do I really need an office? And brought it home. And I will tell you that there are 8 boxes outside my office here that have not been unpacked, because they have like the whole history of the company. And there are times when you're doing it. I mean, even going through, we made the mistake of saving all our kids' papers through the years. Like anybody who's parent, throw it out. So I joke that when I go into the attic to get something in the deep attic, I twirl over Corey's 2nd grade homework. And then I flip over Greg's 4th grade project. And then I twirl over some college textbooks. And then I land on the floor. And then coming back, do I repeat it or go a different way? And I've got to get this attic cleaned out. But I say to parents, save nothing. Take a picture of it. That's it. Because
although I will say, just on the flip side, because I agree with you, and I am like clutter averse in a big way. But my mom died last summer, and I have been going through, her apartment and her house, and I actually found a box that was from my high school, and it included drawings and some papers and some memorabilia. And I have to say, I was like, oh, that rope bracelet. Like, I don't know whether she saved the stuff or I did, but it was actually kind of sweet to come across. So maybe save a couple things.
okay, so here's a parallel here. My mom passed away last summer too. And my dad said, come out to the house and look at like their jewelry, like these things. And I'm sitting there going, that ring was like my favorite ring. I also found out where ring size is totally different. And it cost a lot to get the ring resized. And I did it with a couple of them. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, why did I not have those little skinny fingers? But when we're going through things, you're looking and you're seeing so much of your childhood. And then I found part of my charm bracelet from when I was little was in her collection. And then baby teeth. And I was just there like, this is like the craziest thing. And I said, I'm taking the baby teeth. And my father just looking at me. And I was like, No, but you actually looking at those things, you're thinking of your mom wearing them. You're thinking where
Yes.
they mattered, when she got it as a gift, all those
Yep.
things.
And what was also nice about that, as we drift far away from books, what
That's
was
good.
nice about that is also, and I don't know if you had the same experience, was I spent so much time caregiving for my mom in the last few years that it was lovely to actually start remembering her from much further back and having
Yes.
the, with those old items, just being able to picture, oh, going out to the beach when she was in her 40s and I was young, those types of things, which, she'd just been such an 80 and 90-year-old to me for the last however long. It was lovely.
Yeah, but those kind of things also stir the way you write. It stirs what you do
Yeah.
because you're seeing that kind of emotion. I also will say that my father's living in my childhood home, and I said to him, do you think maybe we could start getting rid of like the Spode Christmas china, like just some things that are in cabinets, like because and he's saying, I don't ever want to leave you with unburdening that, doing this house.
Yeah.
And I said, we could start now.
Start
I'll
now.
start with the liquor cabinet. I'll just take it to my house. You know what I mean? It's like
And did
it's
he?
very funny because he said, I don't want to. And I'm like, but we have to get rid of something at this point to start that process. So
No,
it's very
I
funny.
think it's very hard. I
It
think
is.
people in their DNA, they're either gather. I mean, I am someone who declutters. My husband gives me grief. Like I will, the kids have stuffed animals, and I'll like hide one in the closet. And if after a year they haven't noticed it, then a year and a day later they're like, "Mom, where is?"
Where is
But
that rabbit?
where
Yeah.
is that rabbit? But I do believe in the power of things too, to evoke memories and to stir us. Yeah, it's just hard to know where to draw the line.
Yeah. And there's peril here though. So in Wild Game, your mother was a central character. And
Mhm.
the absence of a mother is a big part of Little Monsters. The fact that mom died when Abby was born was or a couple hours after she was born. Is that something you knew that you were going to have at the start in the story as to not deal with a mother matriarch character like that again?
Yes, and I was so proud of myself, Carol. I handed in that book and I was like to my editor going, "Hey, and guess what? No, mom, this is not a mother-daughter thing. This is a father." And she's like, "Yeah, Adrienne, guess what? The mother haunts everyone in that book." And I was like, "Oh." So I'm not sure I got away with it as much as I thought, but I did really, like, I wanted no misunderstanding that this was my family. Like, there's no one who's doing the same job. There's not the same shape in any one of the people. Yeah,
We've
I
moved on, folks. We've
we
moved
moved
on.
on.
There was this one moment where Abby was creating the perfect color for the signature on her painting. And she was trying to figure out how to get this beautiful shade of lavender, which is color her mother, she's learned has loved. And she's playing with these number of mussel shells and she's smashing them to get the color she wants and to like, mix what was going on. And I love how she was inspired by nature. But you write so well about art. How artistic are you? Are you an art looker or an art creator?
I am an art looker. I'm not a creator. I did actually have an artist friend review the art parts of the book. And she actually did school me when I was doing that paint creation, because apparently I initially made a watercolor instead of an oil.
Mm.
So she saved me from embarrassment there. But I am fascinated that so many paints are actually made from natural ingredients. And
Mhm.
yeah, I love paintings. I wish I had that talent. I don't think I do.
I don't either. I wish I did too. Like I look at things and I say, I could do that. Like you go to Jackson Pollock's studio and you go, man, what's that? Like
How hard can that be?
I could throw paint the same way. All I need is those oilcloths on the floor, and I'm sure I could do it and make the drips come down and everything. He's the closest I've come to making me think I could be an artist. I have to say, but I know I completely screw it up. So I've also got a landlubber question. And I know people in the book, I know that there's an answer to this. Why do you want to order female lobsters instead of males?
Why do you want to order female
Because
lobster?
in the book, she orders female lobsters.
That's right. I think it was because she liked the roe, although probably that is not a good thing because, it would be better that the lobster eggs are out in the water.
Right.
But this is actually, it's so funny that you say this. This is like knowledge that I have that I don't even know why I have, and clearly don't know why it is. But my father, it's always, you look at the antennas, you look at the little clickers, you squeeze the side and make sure it's hard shelled, and you order females. And I've just sort of always done that. They like wrote, I will do this the right way. And now I'm going to have to look that up, because you have actually stumped me.
I just sat there thinking,
Investigative journalism here.
but you know, it's funny because my husband used to sail. He used to sail usually from the Hamptons up to Nantucket. He'd sail here, the other place. So he never wants to have lobster here because he's used to it coming right out of the water. Da, 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 da. And I love lobster. And he's like, oh, it's been sitting in the tank. It's not the same thing. And I'm just there like every once in a while, can we just pretend for me?
Yes,
One little lobster salad sandwich at the end of the summer, you know, really.
My father was the same way. He would actually prefer to meet the lobstermen coming back from the dock. And he also always ordered big lobsters, which, you know, people don't think about, because usually you think, oh, you know, 2 pounds is the max. I mean, my father would get 10 and 15-pound lobsters, these
Wow.
enormous things. We have all these lobster claws on the Cape that my son saves, these just giant claws. But yeah, the meat is actually really delicious and tender and sweet. I think you think of like a tough old cow or something, but
No, but it's
yeah.
okay. So we're going to go up there and that's what we're going to do. And
Okay.
you clearly have a love of the Cape.
There.
You clearly have a love of the Cape and you bring it alive to readers. I mean, you really feel the senses. You feel like, you know, you're smelling the place, you're part of it. And I remember listening to an interview where you had spent a lot of time up there during COVID, and it was a different season to be up there. And we used to go to the Outer Banks in the winter and the spring, as well as the summer. And the place has a different feel. It's got a different vibe. And I think that you brought that to life in the book. And was that like being up there? Did that help writing this book?
Absolutely. But I also have spent much of my life, you know, because my parents were divorced and I lived in a lot of different places. Cape Cod has always felt most like home, because it was the one continuous from like 0 to 57 place that I've spent time my whole life. And since we moved from New York to Cambridge 4+ years ago, we go down a lot during the off season. I mean, when I was in New York, it was sort of the occasional Thanksgiving, Christmas, so on. But now it's, you know, while my mother was ill, it was sort of half of every week. So it was COVID, but it was also just being on the Cape in all the seasons. And honestly, the Cape is just such an endlessly fascinating place to me, in part because of, you know, what you mentioned, there are people who live there year round, there are summer folk, all that stuff that's class and so on. But really, it's the natural beauty that just pulls me away. I mean, it is a place that changes by the minute, tide, weather, light. I mean, the marsh grass, just, it's a wholly different color in September than it is in, you know, May.
Mm-hmm.
You just watch it, and then as the sun's setting and it sort of glows from underneath, it's just such a gorgeous place. But I'm literally one of those people that as I go over that bridge, I drive over the Sagamore, but I have that Pavlov's dog, like I'm just
I'm there.
relax, the blood pressure goes down, that wet, humid air, brackish air, it's just gorgeous.
And then you also can get there and think. And I often say that the best thing you do is move out of where you are. And when we used to be down on the Outer Banks in the spring, when the kids had spring break, we would just sit there and I'd be able to do more thinking about what I want to do with the company, what I wanted to do with my life, just because, and I often worked down there, but it was just a freeing kind of way. And it was no different than moving from the office to home, because all of a sudden you don't have to think about the commute. You don't have to think about getting there.
Qualitatively, the difference, I mean, I take really long walks. I consider it part of writing, but qualitatively, the difference between like walking along the Hudson or the Charles versus along the beach on the Cape, I mean, the thoughts are much, much more bountiful and fruitful there than anywhere else.
Where there's less to look at and less to distract you is one of the things I've said, you know?
No.
Hey, you've been an editor for years. How good are you at self-editing your work before you turn it in? Like, do you, like, because these chapters are tight. Do you do a lot of that?
I think I'm a pretty good editor of my own work. I'm not someone who actually can do that right wicked fast, as the Bostonians say, to the end of a book and have a really sloppy first draft. I am a slow writer. If I write one page, 250 words a day, one good page, that is probably my speed. But in a year you can have a draft of a book if you do that. But I feel like I need a really solid structure and chapter before I can go on to the next. I need to feel very confident about where I am, which doesn't mean it's, the prose are not necessarily glorious there, at that first one, but I need to know that there are not any big mistakes that'll have to come back and change, that sort of it's on firm footing. That said, I also am a writer who loves and welcomes editing. I mean, I know from having been an editor, not everyone does. It's kind of like, don't touch my stuff. I mean, anyone who wants to help me make make this book better, thank you very much. And I have a brilliant editor in Lauren Ween, who I worked with on Wild Game as well. And really just she has a very delicate touch, but she will just like go in and find the one word that should be excised, and she makes it a much better book.
A much tighter book, and she understands you.
Yeah.
Because I know you said I've heard in an interview that you're friends as well. And it makes a big difference because she understands your head and where you go with things. Like it's just like Jenny and Abby talking. It's like they know each other. They got some history.
Hilariously, though, she's kosher. And so she doesn't eat any of the foods that I'm like, wait, can I not make you this lobster thing? And she's just like, oh, clams, gross. I just think everyone else says, this sounds so good and I love it. And she's
like, no, not even with the butter. It's not going to work. It's not going to work,
No, just don't go there.
Do your agent and editor get the manuscript at the same time, or does one get it earlier usually?
Honestly, I don't feel like I've got a hard and fast rule. I think I probably show it to Brittany, my agent, first. And she's also a very good reader, astute, and usually makes great comments. I try to take it as far along as I can before I show it to those people, because honestly, you only get, and again, this is something I know as an editor, you only get to read something with totally fresh eyes once. I mean,
yes,
you can do great jobs again and again and again, but I think it's really important to be as close to there. I would never want to show a really rough draft and just be like, do you think I'm going in the right direction? Because I just feel like that will hinder their work later.
It's funny. I made documentaries when I was at the magazine. And the one thing I used to do is say to everybody, they were about women in their 20s. Yeah. And I said, you get to watch this once and then give comments. Because when you go out to show it to the advertisers and everybody, they're only going to watch it once. So your comments are after this. Yes. And then you get to watch it. You get all your comments and then you get to watch it one more time. And that's it. Because that is as much as they're going to watch. So if there's something you don't hear or you're kind of troubled, and the two people I work with said, you're the best executive producer. You pay on time and you make the train leave the station. And I said, you can't tomorrow come in and say this because it's going to cost a lot of money to make the change. So no. So, and it's funny, like with a book, you're not going to read that chapter again and say, oh, did I see something different? No, it's there,
Well, also, I find this hard as the author. When you've written so much more than is now on the page, like it's hard for you to know what you've actually taken out or put in, because once you know a backstory or something, it's part of the story to you. So it just makes their job harder.
Well, and the last film we did, I didn't go on the shoot, and because I was pregnant with my son, and I said, I'm not going to go with a city a day. So they came back and they said, there's something missing between these two. And I said, no, the rough footage. You saw something. Yes. The story's there. You just don't, you're thinking it needs more, and the story's being told. And it was a very interesting moment with me that I've relayed back in my career over and over of, it was there. You don't need to do any more. You're at it.
Right. It's fascinating.
So your stepmother shared great books with you when you're at a really impressionable age. And What was it like getting this book handed? I love that part of Wild Game is that this woman, when so much is going on in your life, is handing you books, actually curating for you what to read.
So her real name was Melaine Christensen, and she ran the Bookworks in Del Mar, California, and she was just the most wonderful friend and influential person in my life. But it was as if, and maybe she did, she's gone now, so I can't actually ask her about all of this, but I swear, just intuited what I was going through and would put these books in my hands that sort of always were sort of about young women sorting things out, but literary, beautiful books, really thoughtful, thoughtful novels and nonfiction as well. But she's amazing.
Yeah, it was
every day.
And I just love that because I've heard you speak about what you're reading now, and you see where she set your bar to here of what you're going to read and what you're going to enjoy and appreciate. And getting that start at that time in your life, because you said, you weren't a reader before then. And it's so interesting,
Yeah. I mean, I was a reader the way any decent student was a reader. We all hear about the writers who would just have the flashlight under the covers and so on. And I wasn't that person. But I became that person.
Well, I confess that when I was in college, I would much rather read a novel than like what I did take some great classes. I took books that changed America. I took the class where you read The Power Broker. And then, I had great classes at school, like fantastic. But when I got to do pleasure reading, I found that, and I think this is a big thing that happens with 20 somethings. Once you get out of school, you've read this along the way. You get out what's good to read. And I read a lot of Danielle Steele, and I read a lot of Judith McNaught, and I read a lot that are on my shelf still, but they're in the back, like they're not up front. But it at least kept me reading to find my way to to less commercial. Let's put it that way.
No, and I have to admit, like I don't read high literary all the time. I mean, there are moments when I'm reading nothing but. I run a literary organization called Aspen Words, and we bestow a prize each year that's for a work of fiction that shines a spotlight on